Hello, welcome
Okay.
to Fiberchats. My name is Irina, and my guest today is Rosamund Edwards. Hi, Ros.
Hi, Irina. Thank you so much for having me. I am so excited to meet you
I
after
love meeting
seeing
you.
you. So, yeah, this is a real treat.
We've talked a lot on Instagram, and I love seeing your needs. And your needs are always like very colorful and so cheery. And I feel like your whole disposition is like that.
Not
However,
always, but I think that's quite fair, I would say.
right. But I want to talk about your life and the difficulties of it. So, you living this chronic condition, can you please pronounce it because I might just pronounce it wrong?
Sure. Well, the shortened version is ME or ME CFS, but the long version is myalgic encephalomyelitis or myalgic encephalomyelitis. Yeah, it's a
And
chronic condition, which I think people get for different reasons, but my reason I got Epstein-Barr virus, which was like glandular fever or the monovirus many, many years ago. And it kind of stayed in my body. And then I got sick again 5 years ago, and that virus came back and it became ME. Yeah.
right. And it's very like basically hard to diagnose thing from what I've read and heard
Yeah.
about it. And many people feel like they not being heard and there is not enough research going on, right?
Yeah. I think it it's one of those things. I think multiple sclerosis had the same stigma attached until they did the research and were able to identify it specifically as multiple sclerosis. So we're at this point now, before the research has been done, where you get the diagnosis of ME when they can't find anything else wrong with you.
Right.
And the main symptom is if you do anything, you become very, very tired. Um, so that could just be for some people going to the bathroom, that could be enough to wipe them out for the day. Or for me, I helped my son with his homework for a couple of hours and I was ruined for days afterwards. So um, I think we are now at the point, though, where globally, and I think social media has really helped this, people are beginning to recognize that, okay, we've let these people down and there is so much similarity here. And actually, there has been quite a lot of research done now where they can say there are biological factors to this that we can pinpoint. Um, but there just hasn't been enough research money put into it yet. But it's getting there. It's getting
Right.
there. I'm
And it's not
hopeful.
such a rare disease that like there shouldn't be research. There, it's like from what I've
Yeah.
read again, it's like bigger than Parkinson, let's say.
Yeah, it's pretty big. I think because it's called an invisible illness, partly because you can't tell from looking at the person necessarily that they're ill, but also because when we're having our bad days, you don't see us, and a lot of people, and most of the time, I live in the dark with my trusty knitting lamp here that I use to knit with. Um, so it's not very out there, it's not very public, and generally people don't die from it, although the suicide rate sadly is very high. um, so so yeah, it is very common and a lot more common now, especially with long COVID.
Right. And
Yeah.
I think like people after COVID probably can finally relate to your life. Like they
Yeah.
can finally understand what it was like for you all these years to like to be isolated because you are at higher risk for all the like the it's the immune system being
Yeah.
compromised, right? So you are
Yeah.
at higher risk of getting all these extra viruses and stuff that can
Yeah.
damage you. Um,
Exactly. And I think that's absolutely right, that before COVID, people would often say to me, oh, you're so lucky that you get to sit in bed and knit all day. And whilst that is true, and I often feel very lucky that I get to sit in bed and knit all day, um, once you don't have the choice, once you're forced to stay inside and you're not able to go out, that's very different to choosing to stay inside. And so I think people have started to understand more. Yeah.
Right. Well, let's talk about the role of knitting in your life, because that's how we've
Yeah.
met. How did you start knitting? Like, when did you start knitting?
Oh, I started when I was pregnant with my son, who's now 12. And I started knitting little squares. I think I got a Debbie Bliss book from a department store in the UK, and got the yarn from the department store. And I was going to knit him a blanket. I was really sick in pregnancy. I was so sick, and I didn't knit that many squares, and I didn't finish the blanket. So roll on 6 years later, my son says to me, age 6, you know all those squares you've got, mummy, can you make me a bear? So Bernard the bear was born, and to make the bear, I had to knit more squares. And so this was about 6 years ago. And after I'd finished knitting the squares and knitting enough to make this very well-loved dodgy bear, I then found that I didn't want to stop knitting. So and then after that, I thought, oh, I can make clothes for myself that fit my changing body. I was with a new man who's now my husband at the time, and he's an amazing cook, and I was putting on weight. So I was thinking I can make clothes for my body that I love, and I've always liked to be a bit different with what I wear as well. I don't always like to wear what everyone else is wearing, so that was an attraction for knitting.
Right. Well, let's talk about that bear for a second. Were you surprised?
Yeah,
Because it's not a
I
conventional
can go and
idea.
get him.
Sure.
Yeah. So here he is. My son, I now realize, he is a natural artist, and I've never been near to someone who does art like he does. It just pours out of him, and I just love watching him, all kinds of different art. And so for him to ask me to put together a bed, I understand now that that was just him being creative and going, yeah, you could just do that, and which is what he still does now.
But did it
um
surprise you at the time? Like when he asked you to put the squares into the bear? Because like when you told it to me, right? My first thought is like, oh my God, how do you make a bear out of the squares, right? It's not something like we think about right away.
no, I know, I don't know, I think he has been so well. Until about 2 years ago, he was one of those kids that just loved the soft toys so much. And he would, he'd be making up stories with his soft toys. He just really loved soft toys.
Right.
So it wasn't that much of a surprise. And as you can see, he's been pretty chewed, and I had to figure out how to do the decreases to make this ear shape, and they're not quite even. But I think I just thought, yeah, I mean, it's never going to be a blanket, so it might as well be there. And I stuffed it, still got like his old pajamas that he'd grown out of inside. And so, yeah, he's a very beloved bear. So
It's
that is, he's definitely where it all started.
It's funny because like my youngest is he had this blanket that he called the ghosty. So I was putting my hand inside of the blanket and we were talking. So we had this whole like hour-long conversations, and he was telling ghosty stuff that he would never tell me, but he felt comfortable with the blanket.
I
So
mean,
I feel
I'm
like
sure it's some sort of child therapist actual technique.
right.
But it's true that we used to have a thing where every night we would make up a story about one of his toys, and his toy would choose a friend to go off and have an adventure with. And in that story, my son would often end up telling me things that had happened in his, like he would help with the story creation. And we'd be like, oh, so that's what's been going on. And yeah, I think they're wonderful, aren't they? And I loved soft toys as well when I was little. So I was quite glad that I'm sure I encouraged his soft toy love.
Right.
So yeah, so this is where it all started. It's all Bernard's fault.
Well, he can have
Um,
some stories to tell, I guess.
yeah, definitely. And
So,
then we moved into the house where we are now in, and we inherited a load of furniture from the previous owner, which was amazing. But none of it kind of went together, and the colors really clashed, and it kind of, yeah, I couldn't deal with the colors not going. And I thought, well, rather than, we didn't have the money to buy new furniture or to get them all covered, so I just thought, I'm going to knit blankets and just cover everything with knitted blankets. So downstairs in my living room, yeah, pretty much every piece of furniture has got various bits of knitting on it just to make the colors all go together. And
right.
that was the next thing that I did after Bernard. I tried knitting a garment, but I'd picked out a Katia pattern, which had been translated from the German not very well, and it started with a tubular cast on. And I can remember trying really hard as a new knitter to figure this tubular cast on off. I still can't do a tubular cast on. I'm too scared of it. I need to sort myself out. But
Well, let's talk
uh,
about that. So, when you're starting with squares, right? You
yeah,
created the bear, and then from
yes.
that point on, how did you learn new stuff? How did you learn new techniques? What was your learning process?
Well, I tried doing it out of the Debbie Bliss book. So that's how I learned how to knit and purl and bind on and cast off. Um, and then I tried figuring out this knitting pattern. I can't remember if I tried YouTube at the time. I don't think I did. And I found a local knitting class, and I went to one class, and the knitting teacher was brilliant, but she said, I can't figure out this pattern. I don't think you should continue with it. And she recommended Wool and the Gang and We Are Knitters.
Mhm.
And I just was completely sold on the colors and the quick fix of super chunky knitting. And this was 6 years ago. So yeah, I went through about a year of just using the Wool and the Gang little pattern pictures to show me what to do. And a lot of those are sort of knit in a kind of pieces and seamed together. So I did a lot of those. And I learned that I'm a very loose knitter. I never did a gauge swatch. So I was making these enormous kind of garments that were just not very useful, as well as a lot of blankets. But then I started to knit with, instead of super chunky, I knit with chunky, and then I started to knit with less and less weight. And then I found Instagram, and that's where the shawls kind
Right.
of started. I remember joining Instagram in 2017 and thinking, why is everyone knitting shawls? What's the point of that? And I could not see myself getting into knitting shawls. And then Stephen West had released his Vertices Unite, and Andrea Mary released her Find Your Fade. And that picture of Andrea Mary wearing her Find Your Fade in that really iconic photograph, I was just like, this is cool. Okay, now I get it. Now I get it. And it was the play with color and the encouragement from both Stephen West and Andrea Mowry just to go for it with whatever color you wanted. And my local yarn shop was stocking hedgehog fibers at the time,
Right.
so I went full in with hedgehog fibers. And yeah, I just thought, this is wonderful. It was like a whole new world of possibilities. Yeah.
It's funny because I needed the Find Your Fade for a friend of mine. She actually asked me to, like, she's like, I want a shawl the size of God. Like, I want it like larger than you think is reasonable, and when you think it's unreasonable, like, keep on knitting basically. So
What a
instead of,
gift.
right, so instead of,
Wow.
I think there was like 6 colors in the pattern or something like that. I had 12. So the shawl is like the size of the house, but she like absolutely loved it. And I went from, it was like the most unusual combination for me because it went from like dark purple into like whole mermaid turquoises and whatever. And she was like, she loves the shawl, she's wearing it all the time. But it was just so
Ah,
fun to like knit without having a plan,
yeah, yeah, yeah,
because you
yeah,
sort of like find the next color as you go,
yeah,
and you're like, well, this is crazy, okay, let's do it, you know.
yeah. It is fun. It is a lot of fun, and I knit about 4 of those in the end because I found that that shape. I just really love that asymmetric triangle, and I love a big shawl. I used to have really, really, really short hair for a long time until I got pregnant. Um, and so anything that had a big collar or a big cowl, I used to love to wear because my hair was so short. And I still love a really big shawl. I prefer the big shawls to the little ones.
When you pick up what you're gonna knit next now, what how does that happen? Like, do you see something on Instagram that inspires you? Do you have like a year-long plan of what you're gonna knit?
I tried that once. I tried the year-long plan once. Um, and I think I didn't finish it, but I did find it very restricting. And I learned that I need to be allowed to just grab something that inspires me. And a lot of that is color related. I think that I will suddenly have a craving for a specific color and I have to knit it. And if I try and be good and not cast it on and just do what I've currently got, then that craving goes and then that thing doesn't end up getting knitted maybe that year. So I've learned that for me, I need to let myself, if I get a craving that strong, I really need to do it. And even if I don't finish it, even if it ends up in my whip pile, it will get finished eventually. Um, but the joy for me is in that moment when I've got that craving to
Right.
allow myself to really enjoy it. And yeah,
Is there a particular color that makes you happy always?
yeah. So I would say that this one, my lighting's not brilliant. This is the mango colorway from Lockwood Fibers.
It looks so
No, my
soft.
lighting isn't great. It's warmer and a bit more pink, but it's a pinky peach and it's got these bright green speckles. Um, so it's partly color. Also, if I know the yarn dyer or I've met them online and I really love them. So I had a fiber swap partner. It was Emily from Lockwood Fibers, and she dyed a yarn and called it Ros, and then donated the proceeds from what she sold of that yarn to ME charities. And that's happened 2 or 3 times. Yarn dyers have done that, and it's just blown my mind. So she did that, and then I knit this with another of her colorways, and the whole time I was knitting it, I was feeling warm and happy feelings about Emily and her having done that. And I find that it's partly the color that makes me jump onto a project, but it's also, and I know that there are probably loads of knitters out there who just want to knit and they don't have to attach a meaning to it. But for me, if I know the dyer or I love the designer or I want to promote a designer, like the swoon sweater I just finished in the summer, that is what's going to make me jump and knit a project or
Oh, that's
join
beautiful.
a test it. But you can see it's another sort of peachy. I definitely, peachy pink is my favorite.
Right.
Um, but I'm also partial to a neon rainbow or a pastel rainbow or like the bright colors. I'm probably more adventurous in my shawls,
And
because
garments.
yeah, although having said that, I do have this one which was what's it called, the sea glass tea by Wool and Pine, where you're alternating 2 colors every row.
That's beautiful.
um, and so that was just, I felt like such a kid with crayons. It was so much fun to choose all those colors. And yeah, so I've just gone completely off track, but I would say definitely my color, yeah, there's another peachy one.
Right.
My mum's really pleased because when I was a teenager I used to wear black all the time. And
Now you're like turning girly and Peachy
And
pink.
we share clothes and it's really fun and she's really pleased. Yeah.
Right. Is
And when
she
I
a
was a kid, I
knitter?
hated it. She used to be. So when we were kids, she knit a lot of Fair Isle and we all had like really cute kids yoked Fair Isle jumpers and she loved Fair Isle. She's still so busy though now. She's a very busy lady. My dad works full time. Like he works like 3 jobs and he's 72. He doesn't stop.
Right.
So, and I'm one of 4 kids and each one of my siblings has kids. So she's a busy nana. Um, I don't think she's got time to sit still and knit and really enjoy it. I hope maybe one day she will, but she ends up getting a lot of the things that I make for myself because I see them on her and think, well, you've got to have it now. So
Right. Have you done Fair Isle?
I have. Well, I've done color work yokes. Did I put any in my pile? Not really. I mean, although this is, I did hold a yarn in each hand, in each finger for this one. So I
Right.
have done a few yokes. I do enjoy it. And sometimes if I do one jumper like that, I want to do another one and another one. I get into the swing of it. But I think I like for garments, I wear mostly fingering weight because I'm in bed
Right.
and yoke jumpers tend to feel a bit too bulky for bed. So
Right.
yeah,
If you're choosing a pattern, like, do you usually gravitate towards sweaters or accessories?
usually sweaters now. When I first found Instagram, I definitely knit a lot more shawls the first 2 years. And I'm really glad I did because it is so playful and you can learn so many techniques and it doesn't really matter if you make a mistake, it's just, unless I have never done Shetland lace, I would love to do Shetland lace. So I think it probably does matter if you make a mistake in one of those.
It's actually
um,
surprisingly yes and no, because the pattern is so busy that it's harder to spot the mistake. So unless somebody's standing there with the loop and
yeah,
looking for that mistake, it might not actually jump at you as a mistake.
yeah, but if you made a mistake and you didn't catch it, would it then make the whole thing go wrong potentially?
Well, it's interesting. So when I started Shetland lace, which is not that long ago, it's like I only knitted Shetland lace for like 3 years. Uh,
Yeah,
one of the first projects I jumped in was Love Dark. Um, so it's probably like one of the most difficult patterns on the planet. I didn't know that. I just decided like why not, right? And
amazing,
and I
amazing.
remember, so the pattern had some errata to it, but there was also a few missed mistakes in the pattern still. And there's like a bunch of different variations of the pattern. They have like from this year and from that year, and you can make it square and you can make it rectangle. So there's like a lot of options. So at some point, I was like running into something and I was like, is that a mistake? Or did I make a mistake? Did I miscalculate something, or is it in the pattern? And this lady who was in the group, who was like more experienced Shetland lace knitter, told me, don't worry about the pattern, just read the lace. And I found it like eye-opening. Somehow like she made me into the Shetland lace knitter with that one comment.
Amazing.
Because it really, like, I understood that this is like reading a book. Like you'll see the motifs are always there, like they're all similar, right? So at some point you just get to recognize them and you see where you make a mistake.
Yeah, it's so true. I can remember when people used to say, well, can you see a purl bump or a knit stitch? And I can remember not knowing what that was. And then I can remember realizing what that was and feeling so chuffed that I find it. And then I think that's so true. Once you start being able to read your knitting, it's a whole new level of enjoyment, I think, isn't it?
Right. At what
Yeah.
point did you feel like you became an accomplished knitter? Or do you feel that?
I don't really, it's so funny because I mean, there's always like everybody's right when they say there is always more to learn, right? So I feel like I am not even covering the tip of an iceberg with what I have learned so far. But I have just noticed this year that, for example, when I'm knitting a jumper for myself, I am understanding my body shape better. And so I'm narrower at the top, and I'm definitely pear shaped, but I'm learning how to modify a jumper pattern specifically so that it sits how I want it to sit around my neckline. Because if I knit the size that I'm supposed to knit for, say, here, then it's going to be way too big and baggy around here.
Right.
So I'm learning what I need to do to make it narrower where I need it to be narrower, and then for the rest of it to fit properly. And sometimes it's just as easy as starting with a much smaller needle and then slowly getting to the right size needle. But sometimes you do have to make some pattern adjustments, and I'm more confident now at ripping back, changing the short rows if I need to, and doing that, whereas before I'd have felt too scared, I think. So I
Well,
think
so
I wouldn't say I'm an accomplished knitter, because like you, I haven't knit, although you have knit socks now, haven't you?
one pair, yeah.
Yeah, you have. You're ahead now. I haven't knit socks, and I haven't knit hats apart from super bulky wool and the gang hats 6 years ago, and they weren't very well fitting. So there's loads I haven't done, and socks really scare me.
Well, the funny story about it, right? So I
Yeah.
didn't need socks. And then after my interview with Professor Pearl, he sent me a pattern that he hasn't published yet. So he was like, here, you can be my accidental tester, like, and enjoy the
Oh
pattern and learn
yeah.
how to do the socks. And then, of course, I didn't. And then every guy that I interviewed was making fun of me because they were all sock knitters, so they
Yeah.
were like all teasing me. And I was like, you know what? Okay, fine. It's time to learn how to knit socks. So I started knitting socks, and I got to the very toe part of it to realize that there is something doesn't add up, and like my foot is like that size. And I was like, okay, what is it, right? Is it the pattern? Is it me? Like, did I miss something? And I was talking to Steven Weber, who was one of the people making fun of me. And he was like, oh, did you like do reduction at the gusset? And I was like, I like it when you talk dirty, like what's gusset, like. So then I figure out that the way the pattern was written, it was for somebody who understood how to knit socks. And so I wrote to
Oh,
Professor Pearl, and I said, like, oh, this is where I made a mistake. Was I supposed to continue this reducing the stitches? And he was like, oh my God, I'm so sorry. But the thing is, like, as a designer, right, like it's very hard to figure out when to stop giving instructions. So you like,
yeah.
what's obvious to you as an experienced knitter of socks is completely not
Yeah.
obvious to somebody who never done them. And it's
Yeah.
like, it's interesting, like I figure it's like a lot of times when I do test knitting, um i find something I find some mistakes or some like places where clarification is needed just because I'm so inexperienced,
Yeah.
you
So
know
actually that's perfect. I saw in your Instagram photos from the Rhinebeck weekend that you were wearing the Julie Knits in Paris
filigree sweater.
sweater. Yes. Now, was this the sweater? Is that the sweater that you test knit?
I test knitted that, and it was my very
I am
first sweater
so
ever.
impressed. Because I was looking at those pictures and thinking, I know Irina said she had test knit a pattern for Julie Knits in Paris. If it was that one, and that was amazing, because I have yarn for that one and I haven't knit it yet, but I really want to knit it. And when I saw it on you, I thought, I've got to knit it now. It's so beautiful.
I love that
But
sweater.
wow, that being your first sweater as well.
And that's
That's
the beauty
incredible.
of being a test knitter sometimes, because when she told me like, oh, do you want to test knit this sweater? I was like, I've never done sweater. And she was like, okay, here's the pattern. So like designers have more faith in you than you would have in yourself sometimes.
Because you will definitely say, I'm getting this, and you're not going to be making guesses. I think that's one of the things that, when you find a designer. So this swoon sweater, which I have gone on and on about on Instagram this summer, because the designer, Susan Lin, I mean, you could certainly knit this sweater if you have never knit lace, if you have never knit a sweater before, you know, she definitely holds your hand through the whole thing, and it's really clear. And I can, the first time I knit one of her designs was for another test knit this year. And it was just, I'd never done this certain kind of brioche stitch before, and I'd never knit a brioche sweater before. But she did the whole experience was just so rewarding because it was so straightforward. She was literally telling you every single thing you had to do. And the sizing fits just nicely. And yeah,
Well,
so I
since
think
you've done so many adjustments to the patterns, have you ever considered becoming a designer?
no,
You're just like,
I have no desire to design. I really don't. I love appreciating someone else's skill, and like admiring a beautifully hand-dyed yarn, or a beautiful type of fiber. If someone is a really good designer, then I just think that is wonderful. And I don't have a desire to design at all.
right. So what are you working on right now?
Well, this video will probably show when it's not spoilers anymore, when I'm on the Stephen West mystery knit along. I knit 2 last year, and it's that one there. My mum's got the other one I knit, and I thought this year I was feeling quite cocky, and I thought, yeah, I'll knit 2 again this year. But because I helped my son with his homework, I've been really sleeping, and so I haven't had a lot of time, but I'm having so much fun with it. So this is where I am.
I love those colors.
Oh, I love them as well. I just decided to really go with what my heart wanted, and it just wanted this kind of pastel. And I've done something a bit different with these bubbles. It's all supposed to be the same color, but I decided to make them all different colors. So I now have all the ends. But this is just perfect for my brain at the moment, because you're doing something different every 10 rows or so.
Do you like or dislike the mystery part of the knit along?
I love it. I love it because I've done a few of his now, and I kind of trust Stephen. You've got to trust him. The first one I did was the speckle and pop, and I hated it because I made a huge mistake in that I had the pattern printed out, and instead of turning over 1 page, I turned over 2 pages and knit 800 stitches wrong, and kept trying to figure out so I spent about a week and a half tearing my hair out trying to figure out what I'd done wrong, until I realized that I'd just turned over too many pages. I felt so stupid. So once I'd fixed it and figured it out, yeah, I was like, okay, now I understand why people love this.
Do you
I
have
do love
favorite designers that you like always gravitate towards?
So for garments, I think Joji Locatelli is reliable in terms of a well-written, good-fitting design. And this one is probably my most worn of my knit jumpers, which I knit when I saw that article come out. Black woman in a wheelchair. I was so emotional seeing that on the front cover. So I was like, well, I have to knit this. And then I heard Hoki talking about how she'd been in a really low place when she was designing this and really doubting her ability. And this jumper really helped her get out of her rut. So after hearing that, I was like, I definitely have to make it. I love to have a backstory and more meaning attached to it. The first one I made, my mum tried it on and she looked beautiful, so she had to have it. So then I knit a second one exactly the same. I've never done that before.
Right.
Where the same yarn, same pattern, but it's such a fun knit. Again, you've got the lace, and then fluff, mohair and then lace again. So it keeps your interest. I like that kind of a pattern.
Right.
And my friend Tracy, who's a knit friend I met in real life here in Bristol, she dyed the yarn.
It's
Is that
beautiful.
inside out? No, it's not inside out. So yeah, that's probably, so Hohi Locatelli. Susan Lynn, who is Yioni Knits, who designed the swoon, she's got a few sweaters out, and I knit her French terry sweater, and I'm knitting a second one of those as well because I love that jumper. She's my favorite at the moment. I want to knit every single one of her sweaters at least once, so I just enjoy them. Junko Okamoto, I think, is great fun. Really different way of structuring a hand knit garment. Often you end up sort of feeling like you're going off in all these different directions, and you're reading the pattern thinking, what? And then when you finish it, you think, wow, that was genius. So this is my Igawa sweater. I'd love more of these as well. I've worn this one quite a lot. And this one is Vera Valimaki pavement sweater. And I made some modifications. I wanted a much tighter gauge than the pattern wrote. So then I had, because there were more stitches per inch, I ended up making some modifications, which didn't quite work out as I planned. But I'm actually really sad. There's more under the arm than there should be. But I actually really like my sleeves, and I can fit pajamas underneath them. And
Are you very disciplined with like Ravelry notes?
no, not anymore. I used to be, but then I got really angry with Ravelry. I do get on my high horse when they weren't making it accessible for everybody.
Right.
And they still haven't kind of addressed the fact that they haven't done that. So there are still knitting designers out there who can't use Ravelry because it triggers seizures. And because they not only didn't do anything about it, but they were quite kind of sneering about the people that were saying they were having issues. I just thought that was awful. And so I have stopped using Ravelry unless it's to support a small designer who I've done a test knit for, in which case I'll go in and make a project page and be good just to support the designer. But no, I was like this in my work as well. I don't hold back if I think some wrong has been committed, or if I think that something could be done better, then I don't really mind if people don't like me for saying things. Like, I'll just come right out and say it. And even if that means that some people think, oh, or we're just here for the knitting, whatever, I don't really mind what people think. I just feel like if you've got a platform, then, like you were saying about how important you feel that knitting should be for everybody, and that you don't like the boxes that people get put in. And unfortunately, some people do get put in boxes and they get left out. And that's one of the reasons why I love your podcast so much, is that you have such a broad spectrum of different people from all over the world. I think it's wonderful. So I think you and I absolutely sing from the same hymn sheet there.
How much time you actually spend knitting? Because when you're saying you're knitting all day, do you actually mean that you're knitting all day? Or like, are there days when you're not knitting?
I knit every day. Sometimes I only get like half an hour. A normal day for me is I knit for maybe an hour in the morning. I then sleep for 6 or 7 hours, and then I might knit for 3 or 4 hours in the evening. And so if I'm helping my son with his homework, for example, I'll be knitting whilst I'm helping him. So my son divides his time between my house and his dad's house. So when he's at his dad's, I sleep more and I knit a bit more. So maybe 3 hours a day. That's quite a lot. Yeah.
But do you feel like what role knitting plays in your life? Like, if you didn't have knitting, Do you feel like you would be missing out on all of that?
Oh, I would be miserable without knitting. Definitely. It is a it's the best distraction for pain. I have a huge amount of pain, especially in my legs, and I have a lot of medicine. And sometimes the medicine doesn't touch the sides, but if I pick up my knitting, it distracts me from it so much that I stop, or it stops bugging me as much. Um, and I think the community, the people I've met on Instagram and that I watch on YouTube, feeling like you're a common part of something. I think from a mental health perspective, I'm a natural extrovert, as you can probably tell. So suddenly not being out in the world, I think if I didn't have the knitting community, there is an ME community, but that can be quite challenging for mental health. It can be quite depressing.
Right.
Um, I've met some really wonderful friends in that community, and we are there for each other, but the knitting community is my kind of yeah, it ticks so many boxes. Yeah. And I think I used to be in a very corporate environment where kindness and generosity were values that were certainly not seen as important. And so being in the knitting community now and experiencing that kindness and generosity has blown me away. I spent 20 years of my adult life not experiencing anything like that. And now I get sent things and I send people things, and it's allowed me to be more generous and more kind as well. And so much. And I think also, having been in a very fast-paced world, very much an adrenaline junkie, knitting has given me a huge amount of patience. I will I'll rip back a whole fingering weight sweater and knit it again, and that might give me another 5 weeks of knitting that I didn't think I was going to do, and I'll do that without flinching. And so it's given me the patience that I didn't have before as well. So it's given me huge amounts. I'd be a real pain in my husband's ass if I didn't have knitting. Oh my goodness.
Well,
I'd be so miserable. Yeah.
so you mentioned that like you give a lot of your knitting to your mom, and I'm sure to others. Have you ever gotten hand knitted gifts?
I have been given hand knit socks, which was the best gift I had. I used to have a knit group that came here physically in person, but I've not been well enough to have lots of people all at once. But for a birthday, one of those lovely knitters made me socks, and they're so beautiful. I have them hanging up on my wall. I don't wear a lot of socks, in fact, but apart from that, I haven't had any hand. Do you get hand knit gifts?
I mean, this was
Oh,
the most touching thing ever. So Grant
wow.
Murphy, whom I interviewed, and he is the knitter from New Zealand. He knitted
Oh,
this for me, and
it's so perfect for you as well. Look at those colors.
it's a pattern by Monique Boonstra, who is like a good friend of mine and a designer from
It's
Netherlands.
stunning.
So and he did it with the Shetland wool and just like beautiful. And it has the
Wow.
in the center and the waves and all the blue colors. So
The
this,
blues are
I mean,
just
when
perfect for
I saw
you.
this when I received this gift, it was just like I couldn't believe, like, that guy made me cry.
Yeah. Well, you do. I mean, I'm definitely a lot more emotional now. I think certainly since becoming a mum, but like this cozy memories blanket. I remember being on Instagram and people talking about their yarn advent calendars, and me just thinking, oh, I'm never going to do that. I've got 4 coming this year. Anyway, I've still got some I haven't knit from last year. Okay. But anyway, I had a friend who surprised me with a box of yarn advents that she'd put together from her stash, and they were so beautiful. And I couldn't believe the generosity of the time that had gone into making it and all the little extra gifts. And And then since then, yeah, I get sent a lot of yarn, which I love getting. That's the best gift.
That is the best gift, you know.
That is the best gift. Yeah. I mean, I will show you. You can put this in if you want. It's a mess, but look, this is what I see from my bed.
I love that.
Yeah. So I have a very patient husband who puts up with it all. But it means that even if I'm not well enough to knit, I can sit and just look at all the yarn and dream up all my projects. And yeah.
Well, I'm
Yeah.
so happy we had this chance to chat about all the knitting
Me
stuff.
too. Me and Bernard. Yeah. He's famous now.
Yeah, we're gonna.
It's lucky my son's at his dad's, because my son would definitely have poked his head around the screen. He tries to pretend to be cool, but then he was like, do you think they might like to meet me? I'm like, I'm sure they would like to meet you, but it's mainly about knitting, darling.
Well, you know, like when I went to Rhinebeck, I met Veronica's son, Colin, and it was the best thing because he's just like the cutest, and he actually is a knitter himself. So he was
Wow.
showing me all his like the hats that he knitted and the scarf that he's working.
Oh,
It was like really precious, you know.
how cool is that? That's wonderful. Yeah.
I got
No,
to show
thank you so
him the
much for
scarf.
having me.
Thank you.